Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin. Familia, we're round and third headed for home. We're in the final four of our NFL Insider series, Familia, and we're going to the Northeast today. It is going to be, this is going to be a very educational episode because, getting anyone to kind of decipher anything in Belichick country is great. And we are invitados here to help us right now, but also make sure you're going to Familia FFB on YouTube. Give us a like and subscribe. Get that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Make sure our numbers are growing. The NFL Insider series, if this is the first one you're seeing, hey, go back and catch the rest of the AFC East, catch the rest of the AFC. Everything, all of them are on a particular playlist. So check them out there. And also make sure you're going to underdogfantasy.com. Use that promo code Familia23. You're going to get matched up to the first $100. It's best ball season, Familia. Best ball drafts are happening all the way till September 7th opening day. So make sure you get in there, get matched, and use Familia23, Familia23 if you want to do it in Spanish. So Familia, oh my goodness, I love having return guests on here. So Andrew Callahan, gosh, you know him. He covers the New England Patriots for, the Boston Herald, NBC Sports Boston, the Pat's Interference podcast. Familia, it's really good to have him back. Also, I hear a rumor that El Pelon Taqueria has his own table and that they greet him like Norm at Cheers whenever he walks in. So we're going to get some confirmation right now.
Yeah, I wish. I moved recently from last year. We spoke about my favorite Mexican place still in Boston, a great area. I'm a little outside the city now, but maybe enough. A couple more appearances, we'll get it done.
Oh man, yep. Andrew, we'll do that. Oh man. So first off, real quick, quick Red Sox question. I see that Justin Turner and Kenley Jansen have been doing pretty well. Or have they been accepted in the fold, even with their pedigrees coming from out here in LA?
Absolutely. Kike Hernandez, I guess not so much because he's already back over there with you in LA, but yeah, Justin Turner's fitting great. I think he's, arguably their second best bat in the lineup right now, certainly producing like a Kenley Jansen. You can't beat having a closer in the back end that they didn't have last season. It can get a little rocky as it always does with older closers, but they're beloved in the clubhouse. They're welcome. They're good guys in that space and obviously on the field too.
I especially have a special feeling for Kenley Jansen. I knew him when he was a catcher, so
wow.
Quite a while. So when I thought, oh, I'll never see this guy again, and then next thing you know, he's closing for the Dodgers a couple years later. So, mi amigo, Patriots talk. We got a new offensive coordinator with Bill O'Brien. He's got history with the Patriots. Obviously, he's history with quarterbacks. Worked in Alabama, not the same time as Mac Jones, but can you give me kind of a look? I know from some of your early reporting, we're doing this in the beginning days of training camp. It's been a little rough going. What is it looking like with Mac kind of picking up that new playbook and kind of trying to get a revival?
So the Patriots, the first 2 days of training camp, has spent all their time in an area where they were the worst team in the league last year, and that's red zone offense. So, naturally, like a lot of the reporters that I work with, it's a very big beat, it's very competitive. All the notes, the edges, the stats you can come up with, the better. You look at the stats for Mac Jones, he's 11 of 24, 2 interceptions through 2 days. Now, if that was a game, he might be getting pulled. That, almost happened last year with Bailey Zappi. But the things to keep in mind are they're not only working in the new offense that you mentioned. You have some new weapons in JuJu Smith-Schuster at a big day today as I'm coming literally just from practice. But also within a tight area of the field where offenses struggle early in training camp. Then you give them less space and you give them a new system and different players to work with. It's going to look like this. I think it's a little clunkier than even you understand all that and you put some expectations out there. But it's 2 days in. The pads don't come on until Monday and a couple days from now. So I think that's when we really start to learn about where they're at.
So, there were some flashes last year with Mac, and in fact, I remember I took some heat recommending him against Minnesota, and then he paid off for me. So that was really good. But how pivotal is this year, and what can we think that the offense is going to look like this year, starting with him?
So, it's a huge year, and that goes for Mac Jones, obviously, who could have his fifth-year option picked up next May or not, depending on, obviously, his performance this season. Bill Belichick, I've said on my podcast in different places, he's not on the hot seat, but the seat is warm. And it's crazy to say that almost about the greatest coach of all time, but he's 25-26 the last 3 years. They haven't won a playoff game in 4 years out here. It's one of the longer droughts, at least in the AFC. So for them, pressure's on. They know it. That's why Bill O'Brien's here to kind of clean up the mess, install some kind of order, bring everyone together. Mac has said the word now is trust, and that goes to obviously the offense and players, but also just the relationships in the building. So for what that offense looks like, we've seen a lot of 2 tight end personnel. It's been Hunter Henry, of course, and Mike Gesicki, who's a new addition, Devante Parker, and then JuJu Smith-Schuster. So I don't know whether that'll translate. The decision about Gesicki is not so much, do you want another tight end? Because if you watched him for one game, he's really just a big slot receiver. It's, would you rather have Mike Gesicki or Kendrick Bourne, who's been their number 3? Now, Kendrick Bourne, through 2 days of camp, has only seen 1 target in competitive team drills. Not great. And it's not only just due to the opportunity, but I think they're leaning towards Gesicki in that decision of who's going to be the 5th skill position player behind Rhamondre Stevenson, Henry, Devante Parker, and JuJu Smith-Schuster. So more 2 tight ends. I think you'll see Mac more in the gun, more empty formations, and try to retake the middle of the field where he's best. But they were terrible last year, and no surprise, so was he.
Yeah, that's. You're not kidding about this being such a pivotal year for him because, when it comes to him, he's a guy who could help. Like on the fantasy side, maybe teams they're playing with 2 quarterbacks or something like that, or maybe just kind of a backup on a speculative play. I'd love to see him come back. I was really high on him coming out of Alabama. I thought he was going to be, and I thought going there would be a great opportunity for him. So, keeping my fingers crossed for him. One guy that you really recommended last year was Rhamondre Stevenson, and we'll get into the pass catchers in a second. But Rhamondre was one. After you and I talked, I really started to recommend Rhamondre and actually drafted him a lot. Now he doesn't have Damian Harris. I know there's Pierre Strong there as a possibility, but could we be seeing a guy who gets 250 to 300 total touches, including targets / receptions?
So he was around 250, I think last year, maybe 260. It wasn't 300, but I think he'll match that. I don't think he'll exceed it. They don't like to play their running backs the way teams used to, or some other teams like Tennessee with Derrick Henry, obviously Cleveland with Nick Chubb, just ride the guy into the ground. They like to play, running back by committee, which everyone in the fantasy community knows because it drives you all nuts. But I think with Stevenson, you mentioned Pierre Strong. They have reported interest in Dalvin Cook as of Thursday, now July 27th. I don't think that's going to happen. So it'll really depend on Strong or Kevin Harris, who was another 6th-round pick from last year, and how they come along, because Ty Montgomery's already dinged up. He's certainly not as explosive as the younger guys. So a lot of it's on Stevenson, whether they like it or not. I just think they'll do a better job of protecting him, because down the stretch last year, he not only had issues with injury, which slowed him down and limited his production, but he fumbled a little bit more. And at the end of that Christmas Eve game against Cincinnati. So I would still, from a fantasy standpoint, certainly counter Rhamondre Stevenson. He's a top 5 player, not only in this offense, but on the entire team. And then if I'm looking for a sleeper in that back, Pierre Strong has the edge for now, and I think the better long speed and he better hands than Kevin Harris. But I also wouldn't rule them out adding a veteran back, because they've already worked out Leonard Fournette and Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned with our amigo Joe Dolan that Pierre Strong kind of like fits that mold of that second-year pass-catching running back. So I like the fact that you're mentioning him as a possible sleeper.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it goes for James White, 2014, didn't play, and then gets to be, a guy who's going to go on the Team Hall of Fame soon. Damian Harris, 2019, same deal. Less of a pass catcher, obviously, but he comes on in 2020 after basically taking a red shirt. You go back in the time machine, Shane Vereen, same way. Stevenson was an exception in 2021. Still wasn't like the lead back. It was still Damian Harris, but then breaks out last season. So it's just kind of a habit the way they get these players ingrained in their system, unless they draft them in the first round. But then the bad side is, that means you're Sony Michel, and that doesn't work out. So this is just kind of the way they go about business.
Oh man, well, I'm gonna ask you to get your crystal ball ready with the wide receivers. Actually, the whole pass catching unit. How do you see the pecking order kind of going? I've got JuJu, Thornton, and Parker, but obviously Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki have to be in that mix as well.
Yeah, like I mentioned, Mike Gesicki is basically a big slot receiver. They're not going to attach him to the formation, have him run block, have him pass protect. Like, he'll function like a true wide. So I would go with the pecking order just from what I've seen so far in camp. JuJu Smith-Schuster, Devante Parker, Kendrick Bourne is the number 3, and Tyquan Thornton, a distant 4th at receiver. When you combine those with the tight ends, I would say, I don't know who's going to finish with more catches just based on opportunity. JuJu Smith-Schuster, Hunter Henry, then Devante Parker, and Kendrick Bourne, I think, has more upside. But again, I just talked about they're picking Gesicki over him right now. They did it in the spring. They want to play more 2 tight end. So it's difficult to see because a lot of these guys like Henry and Bourne are in contract years. Parker just got extended but wanted to be here. So we did a very team-friendly deal. That plays into it from their effort. What the coaching staff sees in them, what the coaching staff wants. It'll change week to week. It's just a really blurry picture. But if you have to nail me down, JuJu, Hunter Henry, Devante Parker, Kendrick Bourne, and Mike Gesicki could really be anywhere from 2 to 5.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, obviously he has the history with Bill O'Brien, where Bill O'Brien recruited him but didn't end up coaching him at Penn State. So there's that. I like to look at. I want to ask a specific question about Thornton. I know he's had some injury issues both last year and in minicamp and OTAs. Is that kind of could that be kind of like hampering him to possibly do a year 2 leap?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you can't play, then you can't leap. You can't do anything. But I would just say I'm probably lower on Thornton than consensus. And I think what he gets the benefit of the doubt is for 2 reasons. One, he has 4.2 speed. You always want guys with traits that are that rare. But secondly, he's a 2nd-round pick. So just like N'Keal Harry back in 2019, where I'm looking at practice then, you're like, okay, I don't know how this is going to play out over 3-4 years. But right now, he's worse than the undrafted kid who's lining up next to him, and that's Jacoby Myers. And Jacoby Myers obviously a much better NFL player now. I'm not high on Tyquan Thornton, and I think the opportunity is there. They're hoping for that leap from him because not only they took him in the 2nd, they moved up to go get him. The rest of the league, supposedly, if you believe the reporting, was much lower on him, and even the media experts had him as between a 3rd and 5th-round pick. Now, that becomes more, history day-to-day than any sort of reality we're living in now. He also, though, last year played more snaps than Kendrick Bourne and was less productive in total and on a per-snap basis. So it could be a rookie thing because he broke his collarbone and missed the first 4 games of the year. But ultimately, he did less with more. And to me, at the receiver position for a team like this that's starved of talent that he supposedly has, that should have translated more than it has. And 1 target through 2 days, that's where we're at training camp with Tyquan Thornton.
Ooh, wow. You don't want to see that. That's not how you make that first impression, with the new offensive coordinator and everything. Obviously, yeah, especially missing time during training camps and OTAs. Any other offensive player to keep in mind? I feel like we've got everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if we were talking about another team, I'd probably have an answer. But I just don't. I think there's a small possibility. Again, this depends on Stevenson's availability and how the roles develop in the backfield. But Kevin Harris is more of a power back, so maybe he's a guy who vultures or poaches or whatever the terminology is. Those touchdowns right at the goal line, 3rd and goal, Stevenson's gone for the first 2 blows or after a long drive, and he gets in there. I wouldn't draft him necessarily. Strong is still firmly my guy this year, but because of the way they want to play offense and spread the ball out with targets and handoffs and all these touches, it's really a risky proposition, I think, to dive into any one of those players. And if you are, go with the surest bet, and it's still Rhamondre Stevenson.
Yeah, well, yeah. If Kevin Harris vultures TDs, Familia, you'll hear it first, and it wouldn't be the first time a Belichick coach team does that. So it really would. This is a team that's kind of always prided itself on having a good offensive line. Is it looking like a kind of like a good unit, a solid unit again?
No, actually. And it's surprising to me because I looked at this team, at the start of the offseason and clamoring always for a receiver because they just haven't had a number 1 option really since Gronk in 2018. And even then, he's kind of a lesser version of himself. And then after that was offensive tackle. Trent Brown's the only starting caliber tackle on this roster. And you could look at Riley Reif's resume, and it's really impressive. He's 34. He's been in the league for a dozen years, played for a number of different teams. But in the last 2 seasons, the Bears, who had arguably the worst offensive line, or close to it, said thanks but no thanks. The year before that, the Bengals did the same in a similar situation with one of the worst offensive lines. And that's at 34, they're counting on to be their starting right tackle. So Trent Brown was durable last year. I think he had an up and down season. Cole Strange is another rookie they're looking to make a year 2 leap. David Andrews is solid at center. Right guard Mike Onwenu is their best lineman in my opinion. He's hurt, but I think he'll be recovered in time for the season. And then right tackle is a real question mark because behind him is Connor McDermott, famous veteran of the Jets practice squad, where they poached him last year midseason just to plug the hole in their ship that just kept leaking and caused Mac Jones to be one of the worst passers under pressure all season. So I'm not high on this offensive line. I think there's enough there where their best case scenario, they're an above average line. But we don't see best case scenarios in the NFL over 18 weeks and 17 games, and especially with a group as big and that takes such a punishment snap after snap after snap.
Oh man, this is the kind of like honest and unvarnished information you get, Familia. I love this. I love this NFL Insider series for just that kind of insight. Lastly, just on the other side of the ball, how do they shape up versus the run and versus the pass? I know the versus the pass has traditionally been something that Belichick has really concentrated on.
Yeah, definitely. I think, he gets a lot of grief here locally for not keeping up with the rest of the league. I mentioned the lack of investment in receivers and how they're poor at drafting them, and then certain tight ends, and you've got all this cap space, and why don't we have more weapons for Mac Jones and weapons and weapons and weapons? Defensively, they played more dime personnel with 6 defensive backs than I think the rest of the league. And a lot of that has to do with these interchangeable safeties from Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, and Jabril Peppers, who aren't going to, create a ton of highlights. Kyle Duggar will. He'll score you touchdowns. He'll take your Patriots defense from like a top 10 unit to top 2 in scoring. But they're built to defend in the modern league. Few teams defend Kansas City and now Miami last year with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle better than the Patriots. Just go look up those numbers. Did very, very well in Kansas City before that, 19 and 20. So that's the good news. The bad news, I think, is the run defense is a little suspect, where they're counting on Lawrence Guy, another 33, 34-year-old guy, currently in a contract dispute. He's at training camp. You want to smile. Tell him he's smiling. He's not really smiling. And then Devon Godchow, who, in my opinion, is just above average, but is being paid like an elite defensive tackle. And they've got a really great linebacker behind him, Juwan Bentley. But I think teams will be able to play the efficient, success rate kind of game. We'll get 4 yards here, 5 yards there, because the Patriots don't give up explosive plays and they do generate a ton of turnovers. I think they're still built to do that again. It's just difficult to predict year after year because turnovers are one of the least sticky stats for a defense. And that's what causes you to go up and down in fantasy, is being a consistent scorer and then bottom the next year and then up and down. Sometimes it's just to bounce the ball with a lost fumble or an interception that gets tipped at the line. And so the Patriots are banking on that. Again, they've got the talent to do it, but they've got a really difficult schedule. And again, that luck is going to have to be in their favor, I think, for them to come out and be, an elite fantasy defense and an elite defense overall once again.
Yeah, and you're right, and there's no breaks in the AFC East, so yeah, man, it's gonna be some big ones. Well, lastly, you mentioned El Pelon Taqueria, is kind of like reserved for special situations, special occasions. Any new discoveries lately in your new neck of the woods?
Oh, no, not for me. I mean, we go back there when I can, and we, it's a lot of home cooking. We still celebrate Taco Tuesdays, which I know has been kind of culturally appropriated, but it's very vibrant. We enjoy it, try to mix it up every single week. And I actually went down to just, of course, south of Cancun for our honeymoon and picked up, I can't think of the name of the pork, but they were the most delicious tacos I'd ever had. And you can tell the mole.
Carnitas?
No, not carnitas.
Al pastor.
Yes, al pastor. Absolutely phenomenal. And you can tell the mole is real mole. It's not anything you get up here. It was delicious. And, the folks who had worked at that property, we're all locals and kind of saying, no, this is what I had. So if you have it, it's delicious. And it was. So very fortunate in that sense.
Oh, to have a good, authentic homemade mole is just a rare treat, just an absolute rare treat. A couple of people have mentioned that recently, and I love it. That's when I know you're getting the really good stuff. And you gave us the really good stuff, Andrew. Which, mi amigo, this is awesome. This is awesome. You're in the thick of training camp right now. Please pump anything, pump Pat's interference, whatever you want.
Sure. Yeah. The podcast, as you mentioned, is Pat's Interference, PATS. It's on YouTube. It's on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. We're going to be going twice a week. All my work is thebostonherald.com. And then occasionally some TV spots about once a week, sometimes twice on NBC Sports Boston, which has been a ton of fun. But, if you're out in LA or pretty much anywhere outside of New England, you're not going to get the channel. So just look for all those clips and that work and the podcast on Twitter @_Andrew Callahan.
Oh, Familia. Yes. And yeah, the other Andrew Callahan, please let him have the moniker. Let him have the Twitter.
I'm dying over here. Still dying.
Oh, mi amigo, thank you so much for joining. I mean, God, it's awesome. It's awesome. I love this NFL Insider series, also catching up with people. So yeah, and I love that you enjoyed Cancun. So yes, that's phenomenal. And Familia, we're closing up shop. Make sure you're following us on YouTube, Familia FFB. Like, subscribe, hit that subscriber button, Familia. Our numbers have grown tremendously during this NFL Insider series. Keep it going. There's going to have a lot more great content coming up. And also make sure you're going to Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code Familia23. Going to get matched up to your first $100. Fantasy drafting, best ball drafting, all the way up to the season. And then you can do basketball, baseball, every hockey, everything, whatever you want. So once again, Andrew, muchas gracias for joining us. And to you, Familia, remember, todos somos familia. Salud.